What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to another video of weekly takeaways. Week 12 was another busy and another chaotic week that we've had in November, that we've had this college football season. We are getting right down to the wire, and I got 5 more takeaways to tell all of you fine people what I learned over this past weekend of college football action. Before we dive on into all that, I'll go through my usual spiel and just thank you for showing your support for me, for this channel, in any way that you can. If you are new or returning and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please do so, especially if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, because we're going to be talking a lot of ball as we get closer towards the college football playoff. Also, ring that bell so you know when I upload. And if you simply just want to sit back, kick back, open up a drink, relax, and watch this video, I greatly appreciate your support there as well. But you can also like, you can comment, you can share in any other way you interact with the channel. I'll help support what I do here on YouTube. You want to support me elsewhere, go give me a follow on Twitter or X. It's at TailgateNate29. You can look at some of the other stuff I do around the sports media realm. As I'm going to start, hopefully, posting a little bit more regularly now. So I would appreciate it if you would follow me over there. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, told you I'd get my weekly takeaways out today, and let's go ahead and start going through them. My number 5 takeaway is something that I think I've said in a couple other videos before, but nothing that I've explicitly said on videos like this, and that is there are no elite teams in college football this year. Every single team is flawed, and this past week especially showed that, which is why I'm going to talk a little bit about it today. Every single team has had at least one game this year where they have had to embody the mentality of survive and advance. At this point in the college football season, yes, the eye test matters, how you look matters. The committee's going to take that into account. Fans are going to take that into account. I am going to take that into account when I'm talking about college football as well. But as long as you are able to escape with a win, that is the most important thing. Texas had to do it against Arkansas this week. Oregon especially had to do it against Wisconsin. They were trailing, if not tied, for the majority of that game, especially towards the end there in the second half. They were able to pull away in just a kind of tip drill interception, weird play, heartbreaking play for Wisconsin, was able to win the game for Oregon. SMU found themselves down against Boston College. Granted, it was only by 1 point, but that was a too close for comfort game there, right? Clemson had to do the survive and advance mentality thing this past week as well. And if you just take a look at some other teams, I mean, Miami has embodied that this year, even though they lost to Georgia Tech last week. They've done that more often than not this season. Ohio State has had to do it against the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and you just take a look at the top contenders here. Notre Dame has had to do it this year, and there are just so many teams. Every team that you're going to be seeing in the college football playoff rankings. Heck, guys, even Indiana had to do it. Michigan made that game close late. They had to hold on and stop a 2-point conversion. If that thing goes through, Michigan goes down the field and scores in their very next drive. Who knows if we're sitting here still talking about an undefeated Indiana team. My point that I'm trying to make, and then we'll move on to my other takeaways here. There are no elite teams in college football this year. Every single team has a flaw. And I could sit here and point out Oregon's flaw is this, Texas's flaw is that, SMU's flaws is this, Ohio State flaw is that. But, I mean, honestly, that would take way too long. But just know that there is not one team that has separated themselves from the rest of college football this season. There are a clump of big national championship contenders, a clump of teams that definitely could make a run in the national championship, clump of things that can also go make the college football playoff, and so on and so forth. But the margins are very, very slim. There is not one true team that has shown us they are better than the rest of every other team in college football. And this past week in Week 12 definitely proved that there as well. So, again, something that has been known for a long time, because even though Oregon had been undefeated and they'd been winning all these games, they showed us early in the year that they are flawed and they have issues. And they'd shown us at times throughout other games before this Wisconsin game that there are issues and there are flaws. There's no perfect team in college football this year. There's no team that has separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Guys, I can tell you right now, one of these 3 are going to wind up winning the Heisman Trophy. And honestly, at this point, I would just go ahead and pick names out of a hat. Ashton Jeanty has had the best running back season since Barry Sanders has had, and he's putting up numbers like that. And I saw a stat that he is on pace if he continues to run the way he has, and he continued on that pace against San Jose State. Boise State was in trouble, and Ashton Jeanty was able to sort of get Boise State out of that trouble, mainly by himself. He had 159 carries, 3 touchdowns on 32 carries, and I am going to read his stats for the entire season. On 256 carries, has 1,893 yards and 26 touchdowns on the ground. That is absolutely insane. Now, does have a touchdown through the air as well, but we all know Ashton Jeanty utilizes his legs better than any running back in college football. You take a look at what Dillon Gabriel has done with the Oregon Ducks this year. He is now the FBS's all-time leader in touchdowns responsible for this past week, 218 yards, no touchdowns, did throw 1 pick. Definitely not his best game against Wisconsin, as again, Oregon sort of had to embody that survive and advance mentality. But on the year, 3,066 yards, 22 touchdowns to only 6 picks, and has been a big reason why Oregon is the #1 team in the country. And of course, you can't talk about the Heisman race without talking about one of Colorado's superstars, and that is the two-way player in Travis Hunter. This past week, just made some exceptional catches, some exceptional defensive plays. And the interesting thing that you have to talk about with Travis Hunter is when you see two-way players, it's not like this guy's playing every other snap on offense or every other snap on defense. No, he's taking the majority of offensive snaps. He's taking the majority of defensive snaps. He's playing 150 plays per game. There's probably only 5 minutes, if that, of actual game time where he is sitting, resting on the sideline this past week. Had 5 catches for 55 yards. Defensively, again, made some excellent plays on the football. And if you want to look at what he's done so far this year, we'll start with his stats as the wide receiver. 74 catches, 911 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And then you take a look at what he has done defensively. 23 tackles. He has 3 picks, 8 pass defended, 1 forced fumble. He's been absolutely sensational so far this year. And the reason that Travis Hunter's in the Heisman race is, no, the defensive stats aren't going to make your eyes pop out of your head. The 3 picks and 8 passes defended might, and they definitely do to me. But what he's been able to do as both an offensive and defensive player, we have not seen in college football probably ever, or at the very least in a very, very long time. These 3 guys I think are going to be in New York at the Heisman ceremony, and pick the 4th name out of a hat. Is it going to be Cam Ward? Is it going to be Curtis Rourke? Maybe Will Howard makes a run, or any of the other dark horse candidates you want to throw out there? One of these 3 guys is going to walk away with the Heisman Trophy, and I would also tell you it's probably going to be Jeanty or Travis Hunter that walks away with the Heisman Trophy, but Dillon Gabriel well in that conversation as well. We'll talk about the Heisman Trophy and who I think is going to win it, and sort of my opinions on everything in a later video upcoming, maybe this week, maybe next week. Who knows, but I will talk about the Heisman Trophy later. But as we are getting down to the race, pick your Heisman poison, because one of these 3 guys I think will win it, and I think it's a very, very close race for who wins the Heisman Trophy. That's my opinion. You can have a different opinion. My opinion, very close race right now between these 3 guys you see on screen. Let's go ahead and talk about one specific team that I have wanted to talk about in a video like this for quite some time, because, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time you stop sleeping on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And yes, people are sleeping on this team. Everybody is looking at one game that Notre Dame has played this year, and it is that game in week 2 against Northern Illinois, which they lost 16-14. And fairly enough, you can criticize that loss. You can look at that loss and say, how did you lose this game? I mean, Notre Dame's had a bunch of those games recently. Do you remember the loss to Marshall a couple of years ago? A couple other bad losses that Notre Dame has suffered. But, I mean, you take a look at what they have done since that loss. A 59-point win against Purdue, 25-point win against Miami, Ohio. Close one. Louisville made it close late, but at the time, a win over a ranked Louisville team. I know they just lost to Stanford, probably won't be ranked in the next college football playoff rankings. And speaking of Stanford, they slaughtered Stanford by 42. They get an 18-point win on the road in Atlanta against Georgia Tech. They pummel a then undefeated Navy, and I know they've kind of fallen down the wayside of college football recently, I believe, 3 straight losses for the Navy midshipmen, but still a team that's going to make a bowl game, a very respectable team. You pummel Florida State by 49 points, and then defense and special teams show out this past week in a 21-point win against the Virginia Cavaliers, a team not to sleep on either. You take a look at the rest of their schedule. They're going to play Army this week. That's an undefeated team, and that's going to be an impressive win for the Notre Dame resume as well. And then on the road against USC. I know USC hasn't been the best this year, but I keep telling people this is going to be a game which is going to look somewhat impressive on the resume. Not as impressive as if USC was going to be an 8-win team, not as impressive as if USC was a ranked team, not as impressive as if USC was in college football playoff conversation, but a ranked win against a Power 4 team with the schedule Notre Dame has played. That is going to be a very impressive win. And I want to stop talking about the schedule Notre Dame has played. You got to play the schedule you're given, and they've dominated every opponent that they're supposed to, aside from Northern Illinois. Yes, I know, but also, again, they have a road win over a Texas A&M team that's probably still going to be inside the committee's top 15 and probably still going to be inside my top 15 as well. They've beaten a lot of really respectful teams this year. Miami, Ohio, they might be the best team in the Mid-American Conference. They can go win that conference. Louisville, I know they've had some shaky losses there. That's still not a bad team. Navy's not a bad team. If you get the win over Army, that might be Army's only loss this season. You get the win on the road over USC. Again, a road win against a Power 4 program. And yes, while Notre Dame may have the worst loss, everybody, it seems, in college football has had at least one game where they pull out a close win over a team that they were absolutely supposed to demolish, or they have a bad loss on the resume. Ole Miss has a loss to Kentucky. Kentucky probably is not going to make a bowl game this year. That is a bad loss for the Ole Miss Rebels, and you can point out a ton of other examples throughout the nation of teams that just have a quote-unquote bad loss, right? You could look at that Miami loss against Georgia Tech and say, wow, that is a bad loss, even though I think Georgia Tech is a pretty respectable opponent. But this Fighting Irish team is on an absolute heater right now. And with the way the committee has been ranking them, if they went out, they're going to be in the college football playoff, conference championship, no conference championship, doesn't matter. If this team goes 11-1, they are getting in to the college football playoff, and there's not really much that you can say or do about it that's going to change the committee's mind. Stop sleeping on this team. I do think that if this team puts everything together, Riley Leonard is starting to use his arm and his legs as effectively as one another. His arm is as good as his legs, and his legs have been as good as his arm as of late. This Notre Dame defense and special teams, take a look at what they just did against Virginia this past week. It has played absolutely phenomenally, and little spoiler alert for tomorrow's top 25 video, Notre Dame is going to be in my top 5. This is a very impressive team. Love what Marcus Freeman has done, and people need to stop sleeping on Notre Dame, because if they put everything together, they can make a serious run in December and in January in the college football playoff. I do firmly believe that. Let's go ahead and move on now and talk about the Big 12, because, again, I've said it on the channel before, but you got that sense and you got that feeling like the loss that BYU was going to suffer was inevitable. Now, me personally, I did not think it was going to happen this week, even though I felt like there was still a pretty good chance that it could happen this week. I thought it would come next week against the Arizona State Sun Devils, and we'll talk more about Arizona State later, my apologies for that. But now, you take a look at the way the Big 12 race is shaping out. This is going to be a very interesting conversation because, yes, BYU and Colorado still control their own destiny to get into the Big 12 championship game. Obviously, Colorado pummeled Utah last week, and BYU and Colorado still the only teams with one loss in the Big 12 conference. If they win out, they are going to be going to Arlington to play for a Big 12 championship game. But Arizona State, they're still right there, and Iowa State still right there as well. I think people have kind of forgotten about the Cyclones. They can take care of business against Kansas State. They can give themselves as good of a shot. And take a look at who Arizona State has to play this week, guys. They play the BYU Cougars. If Arizona State beats BYU, they are now going to be ahead of BYU for that spot in the Big 12 championship game, right there with the Colorado Buffaloes. And again, one of those two teams probably going to end up making the college football playoff. The Big 12 the Big 12 conference right now looks like a one-bid league. But I mean, people have like, where's the Big 12 chaos? So the SEC is the most chaotic conference in college football this year. I don't know if that's what people have said, but that's definitely what I have thought. Big 12 chaos is going to be here. With that Kansas win, with Arizona State surging up, people have forgotten about the Iowa State Cyclones in Colorado. Look at how much they have improved from last year, specifically on the line of scrimmage. It has been very impressive what Coach Prime has been able to do with that team, and they got some stars absolutely balling out. Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter, even LaJohntay Wester, whatever the last name of that wide receiver is, he is going to be an excellent value pick in the upcoming NFL draft in April. I think he's going to be a really, really good player and is a really good player, but I think will be a good player at the next level as well. The Big 12 race is just heating up in an absolutely massive game. BYU, Arizona State this week. And I mean, look, Kansas is on a heater right now, y'all. Kansas is hot. They've pulled off 2 straight upsets against 2 teams that are going to finish higher than them in the Big 12 standings. They get another shot to do it this week because they host Colorado. Kansas can absolutely keep this thing up. Preview predictions for both of those games will come on my channel this week, but the Big 12 race is just heating up. It is just getting interesting. Biggest one obviously going to be Arizona State against BYU this week. That's an absolutely massive one, but Kansas, Colorado, very intrigued to see how that game plays out as well. But my number one takeaway from this week is from the biggest game of the weekend, and that is Georgia finally starting to look like themselves again, and the Carson Beck of last year decided to come back in some way. Was Carson Beck up to his 2023 form entirely? No. In my opinion, no. This Georgia team's still not up to its 2023 form, or either of the 2 teams that won national championship forms, but I mean, Carson Beck vastly improved his play from where it has been over the past month to month and a half of the college football season. 347 yards, 2 touchdowns for Carson Beck, a QBR of 98. That is a really, really good number, by the way. QBR rated out of 198. Yeah, that's a pretty darn good number. Nate Frazier started to run himself really, really well because there was no Trevor Etienne in this game. He ended up being out, I believe, with an injury. Biggest storyline here is Carson Beck, and he was dishing the football to everybody. I still don't think there is one denoted downfield threat, but Georgia right now, I mean, look, and this is also a weekly SEC tiebreaker check. Well, there are 2 teams that are now out of what was the possible 8-way tiebreaker, now becomes a possible 6-way tiebreaker with teams with 2 losses in the SEC because Florida beats LSU and the Tigers drop their not 6, they have 6 win. I was thinking of that. They dropped their 3rd straight game to drop to 6-4. LSU firmly out of SEC contention, firmly out of college football playoff contention. The Tigers have had a very disappointing season, but how about Missouri and South Carolina? What a game that was, but Rocket Sanders makes that building absolutely erupt, and South Carolina still definitely in contention if there were to be some teams that end out with 3-way tie, but South Carolina, more importantly, knocks Missouri out of the potential 8 to 7-way tiebreaker. But now you take a look at how the SEC is shaping to play out. My takeaway from, I believe, a couple weeks ago, if not maybe a month ago at this point, was that Texas and Texas A&M was going to be an SEC play-in game for who was going to go to Atlanta to play for an SEC championship. That's looking like the case right now. I don't see how Texas A&M loses to Auburn, even though I think the upset can happen. I don't think it does. And then Texas is not going to lose to Kentucky. Again, their toughest test was Arkansas. Besides Texas A&M, that was the upset potential game. They got past it. They should beat Kentucky, and it'll set up a matchup of 1-loss teams in College Station and probably going to be the site of College Game Day there as well. Texas and Texas A&M still firmly in the SEC race, firmly in college football playoff contention. And you take a look at the tiebreaker check with LSU out, and you compare the win percentage numbers of conference teams, which at this point, again, probably still going to be that tiebreaker if you get all the way down to those teams. I mean, Texas A&M is second, so even if they lose to Texas, still a shot they can get in. But right now, Alabama is leading that win percentage chart far and away. Out of all of the 2-loss teams that we have in the SEC, as I talked about in my SEC tiebreaker video, Alabama is the team that has the best shot to get into the college football playoff as a 2-loss team out of the SEC, or sorry, not college football playoff, but to the SEC championship game out of the 2-loss teams in the SEC. Texas and Texas A&M likely going to be that SEC championship play-in game, and Alabama would be right there. But because of their win percentage of all the conference teams that they have played, and you combine that record, Alabama probably is on their way to the SEC championship game. Now, again, a lot of football still left to play. There are a lot of upsets that can happen. That's just the way the SEC picture is shaping out right now. But Georgia, if they take care of business the rest of the way, may have cemented themselves to get an at-large bid in the college football playoff. I still don't think Tennessee is out of college football playoff running, but we'll see what the committee thinks about the nation as a whole on Tuesday. But tomorrow you will get my updated top 25, and then on Tuesday, maybe I'll be able to do a reaction to the playoff rankings, and then on Wednesday you will get my updated college football playoff predictions, as well as we'll start some weekly predictions as well. I think 4 or 5 videos will go up for weekly predictions on my channel, and we'll talk about a couple other things going on throughout college football. But that was my Week 12 takeaways. Please let me know what you thought of this video and what you thought of Week 12 down in the comment section below. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and I'll see all of you guys in the next video. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.